Hello, well, welcome. It is, let me see what day it is, just to give us some kind of reality check here. It is 7th of June, 2017. All right, the 21st millennium since we started counting those things like that. And yeah, hey, blessings to all of you. It's really good to be back. Pam and I have been we were on the road, and then we got sick and blah, blah, blah. But we are back, and as Mike and Mike on my favorite sports show say, better than ever, we hope. So, morning, Doug.
Good morning, John. How's it going today?
It's going good. We had our weekly check-in call this morning. It was great. We just recorded it, and we're just talking about practice in our lives and everything that is we're working on. And it's just like I was thinking when I was getting together myself together for this, it's really to function in this postmodern world, or whatever that is, and what if it's postmodern or modern or pre-modern really depends on you and what lenses you're looking through. But to pull this whole thing off in a successful way, is really complicated. I mean, we were talking about, our workout schedules, our practice schedules, meditation and working out. And, we got this new book that we're started to write, and all these different things. And, Doug, you're a husband and the father of a young, child, and, you're both two working parents and all this stuff. It's like, and you got to pay taxes and keep gas in the car and save for college and God knows what, pay the mortgage off. Who knows? I mean, can you imagine? And then we're talking about practice and, and how, we have to get really disciplined, go to bed, eat right. Like for yesterday, for example, we gotten back and I didn't pay attention to my diet, and Pam brought in these burritos from a local burrito truck. And, I was really hungry. It was 1 o'clock. I ate it. I totally got my ass kicked with carbs. I cannot eat carbs for breakfast or lunch and function during the day. And a lesson I had to learn again. And so we were talking today, and Doug was saying, well, I eat the same thing. My wife thinks it's so boring. But he said, hard-boiled eggs. I said, of course, when I do that. So anyway, I did hard-boiled eggs today after the workout. And so we're just talking about how challenging it is to do the things that we're talking about, like have an integral practice when you have a very busy life and many other responsibilities. But you know what? So what? Whoever said, greatness was easy, if you're going to be the best version of yourself, if you're going to do what we talk about, showing up, waking up, cleaning up, and growing up, those 4 pillars of self-actualization and realization, it's going to take a lot of dumb luck or grace, but it's also going to take a lot of discipline and work. And the self doesn't want to do it if you're not used to it. And so you have to push yourself. You were talking about doing the early morning exercise, how difficult that was to get started. After 2 weeks, it kicked in. So all that to say, we know it's a lot. Okay. Yeah. You got to download the tracks. You got to get headphones. You got to have a place and time to meditate, and you got to work on your body and diet and put all these things together and do your shadow work. Yeah. But it's the only game in town, that really matters if we really want to wake up, grow up, show up, and clean up and give our gifts to the world, which is showing up. So I don't know any way around it, but, when we fall on our faces, we dust ourselves off and get back on the horse, and that's how progress is made. So anyway, Doug.
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing thing. I mean, I don't do all this stuff perfectly by any means, but you go and something works for a while and then you readjust, you continually hone and readjust. It's the plane flying between 2 different destinations is not on course most of the time. It's continually course correcting to eventually get there. And so we keep doing that. But.
Yeah. And I was, Pam and I were just been traveling for about 3 weeks, driving, Northwestern United States. And I'm really good when I'm on the road, man. I go to the gym every day, or I play tennis, and, I meditate, I get my stuff done. But when I come here, I got this neurotic reaction to this little gym. It was a long story, and I don't like it, and it doesn't call to me, but it's the only thing I have, and I have to use it. So I was meditating, and it came to me, well, you need to get a workout partner, which is like something I haven't done in 35 years of, I don't know if I ever had a workout partner because I'm pretty self-motivated. I said, that would probably help me get over this glitch am I working out when I'm here? And I can drive to this great gym 60 miles away, but that's 120 miles to get to a gym, which I do at least once a week. But so I said a workout partner. And so anyway, I was taking Lucy, my dog, out to this little park. I take her to walk in the afternoons. And I found this baseball, a T-ball baseball from a friend of mine, Derek. And he was a great amateur, won World Series amateur, really high level amateur athlete. I said, man, that would be a great partner. He lives here in Teasdale, in a little town. I called him on phone while I was in the park. He said, man, I've been looking to do this. So synchronicity. And we've met for the last few days. We're going to do it 4 times a week. We're going to meet in the morning and work out and push each other and work together. And we've done it twice. And it was just such a solution for my little hang up that was kind of getting in the way of my practicing like I should. So all that to say, yeah, look at it, pray about it, meditate about it, and find out ways, and don't make excuses and just get her done, right? So, and so segueing into what we really want to talk about is getting it done. And we're working on some new tracks. When we hired Doug, we had no idea what we were getting in many ways. No, we had no idea how multi-talented he was. And we both graduated from Texas State. And San Marcos, Texas. So we have that, go Bobcats. Was that the?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Doug has a 4-year degree in sound engineering. And so besides producing all our shows and being a great content writer and speaker and teacher, he said, well, I've been making some tracks for myself for years. And I said, well, let's hear it. And so he created this series of tracks, which it's in the beta testing process now, called Stealing Flow. And it's tracks, and that's kind of riffing off of the book that a lot of you've heard about, Stealing Fire, by what's his name?
Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel.
Yeah. It's a great book, really interesting. And it's about putting ourselves in these flow states so that when we're writing and we're teaching and we're working, that we just get into these almost superhuman states where it seems that the stuff is just coming through us in an effortless, timeless, enriching, inspiring way. And what did you say early in our conversation? The tell us something experience?
Yeah, it's an autotelic experience, which means the activity is rewarding for its own sake. You find enjoyment in doing it for no other reason that you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And the other side of that is also very useful, because that's how we create our gifts to give to the world, which is a huge part of integral recovery. It's a huge part of spirituality. It's a huge part of finding who you are and giving that back to the world. So, anyway, there's this whole suite. I mean, how many tracks are there, Doug?
There are 6 right now that are going to be released in the full package, and they all kind of work together. And
they're really cool. And one of the ones that I've been using is called Warm Up. Is that it? Mm-hmm. And and all the tracks are about 25 minutes, and there may be some extended ones included in the package. But it's just it's really nice. It's this really kind of drony, but it's not. It doesn't feel like you're being taken over by an evil alien entity or something. It's very nice, and it just gets your brain working. And I find out when I do that before I do my deeper meditations, I go into Deep Delta or PMP 3.0. If I do that warm up, it just gets my brain alive and ready to do the other work. So that's one of the ways that I've been using it. And it's been really exciting. And then, when you can listen to it when you're writing, or when you're getting ready to write, or you're kind of, doing a meditation and you need to have some kind of inspiration to what you're supposed to be doing on a project or a book or this or that or whatever it might be, you can use these tracks. So they're very, very kind of karma yoga centric, if you will, and karma yoga is the yoga or the bonding, unity with God or higher self through service to the world. So this gets us in that zone and gets us through our blocks and helps us get through maybe our negative message about what we can or can't do. We're not smart enough, good enough, this or that enough, or whatever our issues might be. So yeah, so that's a nice little warm up. And you'd like to speak about that a little more, Doug?
Yeah, there's quite a bit here. John mentioned that we both went to Texas State, where I got an audio engineering degree, and that's actually the exact time that I discovered meditation too. It was, my sophomore year there. I was about 19 years old and discovered meditation as I was looking for something to help strengthen my ability to study and get through school, and came on meditation in that regard. The interest in deep spiritual practice would come not too terribly much later, because in looking to deepen my meditation practice, I started studying Buddhism and was immediately drawn to the depth and richness of the philosophy. It just started this whole journey. But yeah, at that time, I started experimenting and composing my own brainwave tracks. And, I was doing everything by hand, then researching different frequencies and getting my keyboard out and building all the tracks and experimenting and composing and testing them on myself for primarily meditation at that time. But I was, with the lack of other research available to me at that time, doing a lot of my own experimentation and taking really good notes about what kinds of things worked and what kinds of experiences I was having. So I continued to do that on my own for a long time. And some of you may have heard or read on my biography page on iAwake, or just heard us talking, that I write as well. And before I met John, I was working primarily as a full-time fiction author and working with a really intense schedule to publish Kindle books and make them as good as I could, as quickly as I could, to keep up with the demands of the audience. And there's a whole wonderful industry coming up around that. When the idea occurred to me, I started making a lot of connections that my writing was always so much easier and so much better when I tapped into this place of a flow state. There is something that you will hear writers talk about sometimes, where it feels like the characters are writing themselves and the actions are happening themselves, and you become just a conduit for all this stuff to happen. You can't keep up with your fingers. But I found that it was not always easy to get there. And I thought that brainwave entrainment, that I had been doing for so long anyway, would be a perfect tool to start to work with that. But in spite of the quality of some of the programs that were existing, I couldn't find anything that quite did it for me the way I wanted to. So I took it upon myself to create my own, and developed my own series of tracks to use while I was writing. And that's really kind of how this whole thing started. This was even before I met John. I had been using this on my own to help with that. There are a series of tools that all fit together in a very particular way too. John was talking earlier about the warm-up track, and this is one that really traverses the whole spectrum of brainwave frequencies, all the way down into delta range and all the way up to gamma, and then it drops you back off in alpha before you go. And if you use this for your morning meditation, like John has been doing, it's a really great track for building versatility and helping you to shift between the states more quickly as you do that. And the more you work with it, the more easily you'll be able to do that. And then the delta tracks, the PMP becomes more effective, the deep delta becomes more effective, the gamma burst becomes more effective, because your brain is used to getting there on demand, which is great. But there's something else in all my research of flow states that I had uncovered. And the reason it's named warm-up is because I like to use it immediately before I start writing for the day.
Yeah.
Flow states happen in sort of a cycle where we start with a struggle phase and then move into a release phase before we hit flow. And then we need to recover when that's done. So when you listen to the warm-up track, you start with a quick meditation, and it takes you up to the very high frequency brainwave states that are much like what's going on in your brain during the struggle phase. And then it brings you right back down to alpha, which is the release that happens to pop you into flow. So you listen to warm up, and then you put on the flow track, and you'll find that you enter the state in a quick and effective way. There are also a couple of tracks for, one is a deliberate high focus track. I found, again, while I was doing my writing, that creating a rough draft requires a certain amount of freedom and creativity and the ability to let go and go with the flow and just get the words out. In flow states, we talk about selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. And it's beautiful when all these things come together, a wonderful place to be. But part of that too is that you're critical brain, your super ego, I guess, your focus state is not looking at details necessarily the same way, which makes editing, for example, different. It requires a different level of cognitive
That's
functioning.
right.
So I created another track there for focus. You can, or I used it while editing. There are plenty of good potential uses for it. There's also another track called Breakthrough, which is really used for the kind of deep inner explorations that go, in my case, along with brainstorming, coming up with characters, coming up with plot ideas, exploring what could happen in a situation. And when I needed to have those brainstorms, when I got stuck on something, I would do the breakthrough and just kind of let my mind wander and see where it came up with. Had some really good insights working with that particular track. And that's what it's designed to be used for as well.
Yeah, and there's they talk about in the book Stealing Fire, is that there's one of the characteristics of flow states is there's this richness, like really, good things come out of there, remarkable new insights or new intuitions or new ideas, or, oh, I'm supposed to be doing that. And I read a book one time. It was a story of musicians who were using drugs, and their story of the recovery and crash, and talked about, I think it was Fleetwood Mac, when they were in their most drug-addled stage, when they were doing Rumors around there, some great music, but they would do, stay up and do a lot of cocaine. They write all these lyrics down. They called it bloetry, because in the cold, clear light of sobriety, they look at this is a bunch of crap, So we're actually talking about not just self-delusion, but a state where you're really tapping in to something that feels like your best self, your deepest self, or maybe some source that feels like a higher power. And that is a really mysterious, beautiful, wondrous thing. And of course, you don't want to live in flow states all the time. Just like, as nice as it is to be a 100-yard sprinter, win a gold medal in the Olympics, you don't want to live at the, when you're approaching, yard, meter 90 or something like that all the time. You would die, so it's like these things are to be used, they're to be appreciated for their own sake, just because you feel close to God, you feel close to your source, you feel close to your purpose. It's like, oh, all the bullshit I've been through in my life and the suffering actually is all being redeemed in this moment, and you get the stuff done, and then it's like, oh, okay, great, and then you prepare, and then till the next time that you need to show up in that way. So
John and I talk about integral practice quite a bit on these calls and in our own conversations. And we go with, there are 4 things: the waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. We also talk about mind, body, the spirit, and shadow. And we both kind of agree here and strongly maintain that there's a really essential 5th practice in there, which is that of creativity. And it's not separate from any of those things. Right. Creative practice can tap into all of those things. And so stealing flow as a toolkit really helps you get to that place where you're using what you've cultivated through the other areas of life to bring your gifts to the world for whatever your higher purpose and your connection with divinity has revealed to you.
Yeah, and unlike, we also, Doug and I and Dr. Bob Weathers, were doing an ongoing podcast called The Journey of Integral Recovery, where we talk a lot about this stuff, and it's most, it's applied to the journey of recovery, in an integral way, and I think we all need to be in recovery, whether we're, addicted to alcohol, drugs, or God knows what, we've all suffered, and we all need to work on ourselves and be the best version of ourselves. But yeah, this creativity part is, if it's kind of one of the main gifts you get for working on yourself and letting go of the real often pleasurable highs that you get from different substances and stuff like that. So instead of, you get to feel high again, but it's something that takes discipline, it takes time, it takes grittiness to get there. But the rewards are actually helping. It's going out in the world, it's fulfilling your purpose, and it's changing lives. And that is a great payoff, and that is a great reason to stop doing self-destructive things to yourself, to get into the zone where you're really giving back. And maybe it doesn't just, you can't put a quarter in the jukebox and L7, you have your life purpose and all your gifts just fall out there. A lot of times it takes falling in your face a lot and struggling and getting over your self-loathing or shame or I'm not this enough and all of that. That's all part of the work. But when you get there, it it fills one with peace and joy and gratitude and humility and thankfulness and all of those virtues of a spiritual experience, because it is a spiritual experience, but it's a spiritual experience not of just a contemplative spiritual experience, but of active spiritual experience of being in the flow and giving out and being that vessel or that instrument channel that the creativity is coming through. It's just good stuff.
Realizing that it is all a cycle and it is all a flow of experience is a really important key to it too, because it's not you have a spiritual experience and bang, you're enlightened and it lasts forever. It is an ongoing thing. Learning how to stay with that journey and come back to it when things get difficult is a really important part of the process.
Hey, and Doug, can we open this up to any questions or comments or anything that people would like to share, and explain them how to do that?
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask here about the program, about your practice, about anything else? Flow states, creativity, integral practice, whatever's on your minds, guys.
Like when is this product going to be available? That kind of stuff.
You can go ahead and type your responses in the chat box or just speak up here. Looks like, Chris, do you have a question?
Hello, Chris. I hear wind and chimes. That's kind of a Zen-like question. The answer is yes.
The answer is always yes.
Yeah. So anybody else, you can either type it in the chat box, or you can, if you're hooked up with us via Zoom, then you can just come on and ask your question or make your comment.
And let's see. Okay. Teja asks, when will it be available?
Yeah, when will it be available? Well, we're beta testing now, yeah, and that takes some time. Mm-hmm. And then our beta testers bless their courageous little hearts, courageous big hearts, fill out the forms and everything, and then we go and we listen to the feedback, and then if there's if 95% of everybody says this is just really sucks, we probably won't release it. But if we get feedback and we can tweak it and we'd like it longer, I mean, there's little things to go. And then we've actually done a lot of work already, Doug, especially with the graphics, and he's a wonderful graphic designer among other things. It's just great stuff. So the answer is maybe in 6 weeks.
Well, actually, good news for everybody who's interested is that I think we're actually quite a bit further along than that, and we're looking at, I think it's going to be next week, you guys.
Where have I been? I've been gone. Well, welcome back, John. That's awesome. That is so good. And we're also working on a project with a new website, which is called iAwake Professional. Mm-hmm. And this will be a wonderful starting product for that, because there's a lot of people, and we talk about integral stuff. People are different levels, and they want to meditate and use these tools for different things. And that doesn't mean some people are better or others. It's just people are different places in their lives developmentally. And, we often lead with the kind of spiritual, transcendental, blah, 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 because that's who we are, But we're also professionals, entrepreneurs running a business and having to create and focus and do a good job. And there's a lot of people that, maybe that will be, as in your case, it was your path to deeper meditation. So we decided to create a thing called iAwake Professional, and it's going to really be geared in language toward those who are really, students who need to be, their brains need to be functioning, and they need to be able to focus, create, write, study, entrepreneurs, people that work in, larger organizations that just need to be able to function, deal with stress, be creative, get over their depression or whatever, all that stuff that keeps us from really performing at a high level. So yeah, speed it up. Yeah. Old stick in the mud, John said 6 weeks, and a young stick out of the mud, Doug said a week. So that's great.
Yeah. So one of the other things kind of on that note, John, about stealing flow, and this again, came from the way I designed it when I was writing full time, but certainly applies for students and entrepreneurs and people who need to get some work done too, is that when you're working on things like that that require a lot of mental effort and are hard to stay on task when you've got the temptations of, Facebook and things on TV and everything else going on to distract you, there's a productivity method called the Pomodoro Technique, which I have found to be incredibly effective, which is working in 25-minute blocks followed by a 5-minute break. And you repeat about 4 of those. So all the tracks of Stealing Flow are 25 minutes long. So you can listen to one, and as soon as the track is over, you take a break. And then you come back and do another one, and you take a little break. And when I was using that with my writing, I was able to get a lot more done and a lot better quality and explore creativity, and just had a lot better results doing it. So if anyone is interested in using it that way for work, for study, for whatever you need, it's already set up as a perfect complement to those kind of productivity practices.
Here's a question, Doug. Are these tracks made to be listened to like for 3 or 4 hours in a sitting? Or are they really powerful and you should just kind of use them to get going? Or how do you recommend?
So there are some that are pretty powerful. For example, the warm-up, you don't want to do warm-up more than 2 hours in a day. That one is very strong. Same with the high focus. The primary Stealing Flow track itself, though, is one that you can listen to a little bit longer. The entrainment is still very effective, but it's much, much smoother than some of the other things that we're used to that just, kick you into state and really stretch your brain in that way. Now, working with Stealing Flow will still train your brain to that state, but it doesn't drain you quite the same way with that primary
push you into kind of an overload thing. It's just like, just like going to the gym. If you're lifting really heavy, you just can't continue to do, massive bench press or really heavy bench press for 8 hours. You do it for a certain amount to cause you to, your muscles to grow and stuff like that. So you have to use these things with wisdom too, because it's powerful medicine. This stuff is really strong. And of course, I've been doing this kind of meditation or using brain entrainment stuff for about 11 years. So I know when I'm kind of getting to that overload state. And sometimes I'll, if I'm doing a long meditation, like 2 hours or more sometimes, and I'll stay there for, a few minutes, into that. But I know it's about time to turn it off, and then I can just kind of sink into kind of more traditional, unaided, but I'm already in this deep, deep meditative state. So it's quite beautiful. So these are just some of the tricks of the trade and how you learn to work with this stuff.
And, flow states in particular, we were talking earlier about the cycle of it, and that recovery phase matters a lot. If you don't give your brain time to replenish those neurochemicals that are released while all this is going on, then you're not going to be able to continue. I mean, aside from the neurological push that you're getting from the iAwake technology, flow states themselves are not something you can sustain the whole time. And the attempt to do so can, really cause a lot of problems. You read stories about these extreme athletes, the adrenaline junkies who end up in, death-defying situations when perhaps they shouldn't have been because they can't let it go.
Yeah, well, that was, the book before Stealing Fire was called The Rise of the Superman, which is by Kohut, right? Not Wheeler. He was a part of that.
Steve Kotler, yeah.
Kotler, sorry. Kohut, that was something else. Czechoslovakian astronomist who had a comet named after him. But anyway, yeah, so they were doing these extreme athletic things like jumping off buildings, these bat wings off skyscrapers and zooming through Manhattan, it's like, and in those things, I mean, there's just such a, just a pressure and rush and stress, and you kick into these states and you know how to not to hit that building on your good days. And if you have a bad day, you die. So people were actually coming somewhat addicted to these states, and they kept pushing these extreme athletic things, and a lot of people were dying. So it's like, these are incredible spiritual states, and time does weird things, and you have foresight, it's like you're seeing ahead, a few seconds in time to know what you do before, faster than linear thought, and all these things going on. But it's very dangerous, but it was very well documented. So they started talking about in this book, how do you do it? Now there's a lot of people microdosing with LSD. I did an interview with Jonathan Robinson on the spiritual technology thing, which is, it's LSD, it's an illegal drug. So there, at least here in the United States. So, and, having big gyms and, doing all these things. And we found, which is the coolest thing, that the technology that we've been developing puts us in these states. And it is not addictive. There's no negative side consequences. You're not going to kill yourself and abandon your children, and your family because you're addicted to doing these, crazy climbs or whatever it is you're doing. And that's just really extraordinary. So you don't have to take drugs. You don't have to put yourself at risk. You don't have to spend millions of dollars, having some kind of thing that spins you around. Also, the book talks about how Navy SEALs are very much studying this stuff, because when a SEAL team goes in, they have to shift leadership all the time, because one guy is, in emergency situations, not just, what do I do now, Sarge? I mean, they work as a team, and they've noticed at their most successful performance, that's what happens. And so they were testing people are these SEAL candidates capable of doing this stuff, and very few were. And they said, wait, otherwise we're missing a lot of really good people. Can we train people who are otherwise okay to be able to do this stuff? And Dr. Bob Weathers, Doug and I, we've been doing this podcast for, I think we're on week 18 or something like that. And when we record, we normally do 3 programs at a time, but we keep getting to these flow states, and they're just extraordinary. It's really a highlight of our week or our month when we're able to get time and record together. And it's because, I think because we're talking about stuff that's very important, right? Integral recovery, and we're talking about something that's very personal, because we're all in recovery, and we're all working on ourselves, and we're doing the practices that we're preaching. But the synergy, it's like playing with a great group, a band, or a group of musicians, or a group of actors, or a great creative team, or, SEALs, or just that unity of consciousness that is also very individual at the same time. It's just extraordinary stuff. And use this stuff, and we're getting there in a way that's really affordable, I think, and really there's no negatives.
You talk about selfless, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness, and that sounds exactly like meditation to me.
Yeah.
They talk in the book Stealing Fire about this continuum of risk versus reward, and they talk about how long various things take. Obviously, jumping off a building in a wingsuit is going to get you pretty fast, but there's a lot of risk involved with that. And meditation is relatively safe, but like John was talking about, with this technology, we can get there without waiting for 30 years. We can really accelerate our development through these states and our ability to access them, which is a brilliant thing.
And we have a question, Doug, from Stephanie.
Oh, okay.
And she says, I'm just starting with this. Should I listen to Ocean for an hour a day, or can I listen longer? Well, first of all, Stephanie, are you an experienced meditator? Have you been meditating for a while? Because it seems that people who have already developed a discipline and practice can really move into this thing, hit the ground running. For some of us, especially some of us are really sensitive, and we have to kind of ease into it. Or some of us may be sitting on lots of PTSD and trauma they haven't quite dealt with yet, and that can come up, which is a really good thing, because it's how we heal from this. But if you're not ready for it, it can be overwhelming, so you have to go slow. Okay, meditate every day. Good. So Ocean, for example, I think that's a really gentle track. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's not one that I think is going to push you, like, if you're using tier 3 PMP 3.0, I mean, it's just like, whoa, it's a heavy lift. And I wouldn't listen to those 3 tracks more than 1 hour together. I mean, or you could divide them up like that. But I think from what you're saying, it sounds like that would be fine. And I think you could listen to Ocean for an hour a day or longer. When you get to that hour, how are you feeling? Really check in with yourself. Okay. So you really have to be kind of self-guided. And one of the things that's good about this, using this technology and doing the interior practice on an ongoing basis, we become more at home with ourselves. We become less repressed, and we can kind of listen to our own subtle energy and wisdom. So in theory, no, and it'd be fine, but just make sure that you check in. And if you get into that zone after an hour and you'd like to continue it, I find in my longer meditations, it's really usually right toward the end that I get into these samadhi states of just the mind body drop, all that stuff is gone, ego, thoughts, and I'm just in this presence, and expands out into eternity in a moment, as the poet said. So I hope that's helpful. Anything you want to riff on that, Doug?
No, I think that you covered that all pretty well. I mean, my general recommendation is to experiment and find out what works for you. But like John said, it's really important to be aware of that experience as you're going. And Ocean is a gentle one. I think that for most folks, even 2 hours a day would be a good, good, safe amount of time to work with that track. It's a beautiful one too.
Yeah, it really is. And, and I'm kind of getting to this thing that I've been experimenting with, is that you need to spend about as much time exercising physically every day as you do doing the interior work. Okay. So if you meditate for 40 minutes a day and you hit the gym, really intensely, or whatever your exercise is, for 40 minutes a day, and you kind of get a balance of that, that's really cool, because you're honoring two essential parts. And the one just won't do the other. You have to do both of them. You have to deal with the objective physical out there body, which is the vehicle for all this stuff. And you have to deal with the interior stuff, and with, subtle and causal and non-dual and shadow, and all these essential things that we have to encounter. And mindfulness, that I really think mindfulness is kind of the beginning of the game. It's not the end of it. The mindfulness is what gets you to the stage where you can really go deep and start manifesting what you need to be doing, at the same time resting in the non-doing. So like the college professor, a student came up to him, he's a philosophy professor, he says, professor, after the lecture, it's like, you're saying the nature of truth is paradoxical? And he went, well, yes and no. So, it's kind of, it's like, that's kind of these paradoxes that we run into, and they're kind of mental paradoxes, but in the actual spiritual experience, the paradoxes are unified in ways that maybe we can't even just explain intellectually, but we know. There's a deeper knowing, and some of us are gifted at expressing. We have the gift of language and poetry and music and art to be able to express what these deep states are about, and that can also transmit these experiences to other people. That's why we do what we do.
That's one of the other nice things about working with this technology, any of it really, is that it stimulates the connection between your hemispheres. A lot of that ineffable, undescribable stuff is happening over here in your holistic right hemisphere. I may be reversed on the screen, but this is my right hemisphere. And, it improves your ability to translate some of that inexpressible stuff into an experience that you can understand. And even if you can't, that's okay. It helps you to accept that as well. One of the things that we've always emphasized here at iAwake Technologies is that along with just using the entrainment tracks, it's the practice that goes along with it. The meditation practice is a really important part of that, because it plays so many roles, and the tracks help you get there faster, but what you bring to it matters a great deal. This internal sense of feedback from moment to moment, and learning to recognize that is an important part of what makes the experience so powerful in the first place.
Yeah, there are tools for practice, so you do have to practice. And when you're just beginning, if you've never meditated, you've never listened to stuff, sometimes you just sit down and listen to it and pay attention to what's going on, in your body, your mind, and stuff like that. But as you develop and become, a more experienced, disciplined practitioner, you learn how to practice more. Just like we took a young man out to play tennis with Pam and I a couple of days ago, and he was pretty good, but it was obvious that Pam and I put many years into playing this crazy game, and he was just starting. And so, that's the way it goes when you're just a beginner. There's different rules and different expectations, and you work through your expectations and your projections and what you think it should be, and then what it is, and there's all this complexity and beauty that is part of the journey. That's very exciting and very rewarding, and can be frustrating at times and difficult, but so what? Who everything said was supposed to be easy, and that's the crazy thing, because the paradox, to be free, you have to develop discipline. Mm-hmm. Freedom is not just doing whatever you want to do whenever you feel like it, that becomes slavery, as in the case of addiction and other kind of dysfunctional things that we get hooked into. But a real freedom, the spiritual freedom to create, to be ourselves, to be as loving and as wise, and all these things that are the B values that Maslow talked about, takes work, hard, disciplined, intelligent work, and you have to hit the essential stuff. And that's such an exciting, good story. So.
And that's really where the happiness comes in too, because those things end up being the most rewarding things in our life. I was reading just the other day about some research they had done where they gave people a beeper that would go off at random times, and they would record their experience, their amount of happiness, et cetera, whenever this beeper went off. And they found that those who were engaged deeply in hard work, things like meditation, exercise, working on writing a challenging book or whatever the case may be, were happier than the people who were just kind of lost in their heads, watching TV or playing on the internet or doing things that didn't challenge them in the same way. And that's completely separate than the satisfaction of knowing that you did something worthwhile at the end of the day, and that you were able to contribute to humanity, to the lives of your family and your friends and the world as a whole.
Doug, can you give a plug for the podcast and where people can go and listen to the old ones and get the new ones, et cetera?
Yeah. So John and I have conversations like this every week with Dr. Bob Weathers on integral theory and recovery. It is integralrecoveryinstitute.com. If you go there, there's a starter kit that you can get, and also our podcast episodes. There's a link for podcast at the top, or go to integralrecoveryinstitute.com/podcast. And it's got all our latest episodes and a link to iTunes too, so that you can subscribe. And if you do, please, rate, leave a review and all that wonderful stuff to help support this project.
Brilliant.
I'll put it in the chat box here.
Yeah, put it in the chat box. So it's about time to wrap it up. Are there any last questions or comments anybody would like to ask about any old thing or about what we've been talking about? Okay, yeah, thank you too. Also, I really appreciate you, and thank you guys for showing up and for your presence. I feel it. Even if I can't see your face, it makes a big difference. We were talking about that earlier, how when we're doing these things, how the fact that we're in conversation, but the fact that we have a lot of live audience also adds a field and a dimension that really helps us to show up. And it's just the best. We need each other. And so anyway, thanks everyone. And yeah, stay tuned for check out the podcast and participate in the podcast. Send us questions if you have any questions. And all of us are involved in addiction and recovery. I don't think there's anybody who lives in the world who hasn't either suffered from it themselves, have someone in their families, loved ones, friends, co-workers, the taxes we pay because all the people we have to keep in prison because of the drug-related crimes, all of that. There's none of us that are not affected. And of course, the other big thing about integral recovery is everything that we've been saying for the so-called addicts and alcoholics is absolutely applicable for everyone that has a body and is alive and a brain and living in the world. So it's focused, but it's also universal at the same time. So anyway, God bless you guys. Love you. Thank you so much. And let us know if we can serve you in any way. And we're here.